to plunge me 'neath the healing, cleansing flood. Jesus, Jesus, how I trust him, how I've proved him o'er and o'er. Jesus, Jesus, precious Jesus, oh, for grace to trust him more. Yes, 'tis sweet to trust in Jesus, just from sin and self to cease, just from Jesus simply taking life and rest and joy and peace. Jesus, Jesus, how I trust him, how I prove him o'er and o'er. Jesus, Jesus, precious Jesus, oh, for grace to trust him more. I'm so glad I learned to trust thee, precious Jesus, Savior, friend, and I know that thou art with me, wilt be with me to the end. Jesus, Jesus, how I trust him, how I proved him o'er and o'er. Jesus, Jesus, precious Jesus, oh, for grace to trust him more. Absolutely wonderful. Thank you very much.
Amen. You can turn to Judges chapter 6. Anybody want to give a testimony on how they have proved Jesus? We all said it 4 times, so. Anybody got a word of testimony? Yes, ma'am.
Well, I was just thinking in these last few weeks how good God has been to me personally. And you all know I've had a sewing business for years, and I always have plenty of work coming in. But I've had periods in my life where I've needed rest from that. When I broke my ankle, I had 2 months where almost no jobs came in, and I was thanking the Lord for that.
Wow.
But in January, we've had a big project going on in our house, and again, it was a time that I really didn't need any jobs coming in, and I saw almost nothing come in. And as we've been completing this job, suddenly things are coming in again. And I just thought, isn't God good? You know, even to me in my little business at home, that he watches out for me.
Wow. What a blessing. What a blessing. Anybody else? Quick word of testimony. How good? Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
We've been traveling for 35, close to 40 years, and I recounted one day 12 different times when we broke down on the road where the Lord helped us.
Wow.
The last one was a couple weeks ago. We were in Springfield, Missouri, and we stopped at my daughter's house. It's about 600 miles from here, and we smelled antifreeze, and looked under the hood, and there was antifreeze sprayed all over the top of the engine. And so I called 2 repair shops. They turned me down, couldn't get us in. The third one, I got in, and the guy helped me. He was really helpful. He says, well, if you get here, we're all scheduled up, but we can get you in. Probably we'll just work you in. Well, come to find out, some mice had chewed on hoses underneath the hood, and that's what the problem was. Well, they fixed it. Well, I gave him a tract, and he said, oh, I'm a Christian. I go to such Baptist church down here. And I said, well, that's the difference. When the Lord puts you in contact with the right people, you get help every time. It's just, the Lord has just amazed us. When you have that happen once or twice, it's a coincidence, you know, you think, but when it happens a dozen times in a row, the Lord is really good.
Amen. Anybody else? Anybody else? I had one of those. We were driving in Africa between the capital city and where we lived. It's about a 3-hour drive. Midway through, we broke down, and this is about 10 o'clock at night, pitch black, only one road, literally just one road between us and the capital, no side roads at all. And we thought, my goodness, nobody drives at night because it's so dangerous and because there's no lights and et cetera. And who's going to come by? We're 200 miles from a tow truck. Within 10 minutes, a car comes and asked us if we need help, and I was like, well, you know, we're broke down. I don't know what he's like, oh, I got a tow rope, and I'll tow you. And they towed us with a tow rope all the way home, And it turns out she was a member of the Brazilian Olympic team, had married a Zambian guy, and they lived in Brazil, and she was coming to spend 2-3 weeks in Zambia to visit his family, and they happened to be driving down. Oh, somebody not from here. That's why you're driving at night. So, but got a chance to witness to him, and God proved himself o'er and o'er and o'er. So, all right, Judges chapter 6. Judges chapter 6, complete with background music, my story was. Judges chapter 6, verse 25 and 26, and we're going to go all the way down to verse 32, Lord willing. Probably actually down to verse 35. But we covered verse 25 and 26 already, where Gideon, and let me throw this out. Let me throw this out and ask you a question. What one word do you think of when you think of Gideon? I don't have an answer, so it's not a trick question. What word do you think of when you think of Gideon? What word do you think of? Not like there's a secret word. Try to be like, what's Pastor thinking? I'm not thinking anything. What do you think?
Mine is actually, I keep thinking of I think of tubas because of the VeggieTales one.
Tubas?
In the VeggieTales
It's a VeggieTales Gideon. Okay.
Gideon thing.
All right, there you go. It's okay. Brother Terry?
I watched it 50 minutes.
Testing. Okay, testing. Anybody else? What word do you think of when you think of Gideon? It's quiet tonight. That's a hard preaching. No, it's not. Brother John? Little faith? Okay, little faith. The fleece, yeah, absolutely. We're going to get to that. So he has met with the angel. The angel has said, you're the guy who's going to help all these people. It's a missions conference, and God reaches down and says, Paul, I want you to be a missionary to Mexico. Pretty amazing, pretty awesome. But then you realize, wow, this is a daunting task. And Gideon goes through some proofs, and he's going to do that again later on, testing the angel to see the veracity or the truth of the message. And we'll talk about testing the truth and the wisdom of that or lack of wisdom of that. Then God immediately tells him to do something. He tells him to do what? What does he tell him to do immediately? Besides the deliverance of the people, what does he tell him to do? And that is found in verse 25 and 26. What's he tell him to do? Tear down the altar. What else? Sacrifice the bullocks. And then one more thing. Build an altar. One more thing. One more thing. Cut down the grove of trees. So it's a grove of trees that is dedicated to Ashtaroth. The altar is to Baal. Baal and Ashtaroth in the spiritual world are married, and they're doing sacrifices. Could have been child sacrifices. The Bible doesn't say necessarily in this case, but it could have been that way. And Gideon is supposed to do that when it's convenient. When he works up the courage. When he's got a following and he's swayed the crowd and they can do it all at once. No, God says, this night I want you to do it. And Gideon carries out the command. Somebody read verse 27 for me, if they would, please. Verse 27. Thank you, Joe Pagano. Appreciate you raising your hand. Verse 27. Can you read that, please? 6:27? Correct.
Then Gideon took the 10 men of his servants and did as the Lord had said unto him. And so it was, because he feared his father's household and the men of the city, that he could not do it by day, that he did it by night.
Okay, he did it by night. How many can identify with Gideon that he had faith but with a little fear? That's me. I got a little faith and I got a little fear, but he went forward, he did it. He had help to do it. It was quite a job. A whole grove of trees chopped down, an altar torn down. It could have been 3-4 feet tall. There are some altars that we saw in Israel that were 20 feet tall. That were 20 by 20 by 20. I mean, it's these massive structures. We don't know how big it was. And then he rears the other altar. So now he has sacrificed. The morning comes. The dawn comes, okay? And I would like to tell you that when you come forward in a missions conference, when a young person gives their life to God at a teen activity or a teen camp, when finally you give in to God in tithing or missions giving, or you volunteer for King's Kids or something, when you take a step forward, I'd like to tell you that everybody just falls in line. That if you're married and you got children and dad or mom makes a decision for Christ, that everyone just says, oh, that is wonderful. And it's wonderful when it happens. And it can happen. It has happened in some situations. But lots of times, if you're going this way with the current along with other people and you turn around, you know what's going to happen? Boom. You're going to have some opposition. And the men of the city are angry with Gideon. Verse 28. Who can read verse 28? Verse 28. Mr. Jared.
When the men of the city arose early in the morning, behold, the altar of Baal was cast down, and the grove was cut down that was by it, and the second bullock was offered upon the altar that was built.
Okay. It was exactly what it was. He had done it, and there it is, for all the world to see. And they said one to another, verse 29, who hath done this thing? And when they inquired and asked, they said, Gideon, the son of Joash, hath done this thing. Verse 30, then the men of the city said unto Joash, bring out thy son, that he may preach to us, and we have a revival. What happened here? That he may what? That he may die. Just a couple observations. How awful is the spiritual state of Israel right now? This is terrible. This is awful. Here is an ungodly, idolatrous family. This was Joash's altar. This was his personal family altar. That Gideon knew it was there. This is not saplings. This is a whole grove of trees, perhaps planted for that case, or maybe the altar was brought for that case. But this is something that has been there for some time on his personal property. And the men of the city don't come and say, you should die because you have the altar. It says, you should die because you tore down the altar. What an awful state Israel is in. But what does that tell you about the reaction to when somebody does something righteous? When you do what's right, other people are convicted. What's your observations on that verse? How would you feel if you're in Gideon's spot? What advice would you give to Gideon? Be nice to your dad. Do you think Gideon felt betrayed by the Lord? Or do you think he felt like Joseph? Now, the Bible doesn't tell us what Gideon was thinking, and I do not want to presume upon his motives. But I just want to a little bit peel back the curtain and say, what was going through his heart? Was it like Joseph in the pit, or Joseph at Potiphar's house, or Joseph in the prison? Well, look, my dreams haven't come to pass, and so I'm going to be kept safe. And he didn't say those words specifically, but he always had a view of God is going to bring this good to pass and so on. So did he have that mindset, or did he have the mindset of Elijah on Mount Carmel where he had this great victory, and then he went to Jezebel, went to Samaria where Jezebel was, I think it was Samaria, and she said, I'm going to cut your head off, and he took off, went into the wilderness and said, that's it, I'm dead. Like, wait, who's in charge here? Do we sometimes feel like Elijah more than we do Joseph? I mean, if you think about this what's happening, he was just told, I'm going to use you to deliver all of Israel. This is just a little speed bump. I mean, who cares what the men of the city say? Now, that's from God's perspective, but how did Gideon feel when those guys came and said, you're going to die? How would we feel? Brother Chuck.
Well, I think because he did this at night, he knew there was probably going to be some negative reaction.
Yeah.
But he did it anyway.
Yeah.
Because God told him to.
Amen.
I think he realized there was going to be there's gonna be something to pay for that.
Absolutely.
Scared to find out what was gonna happen.
Absolutely. Yes, sir, Brother Ken?
I always like the answer that Samson's mother gave to her husband when the angel came and told him that they were going to have a child special to deliver Israel. And Manoah, the father, said, "We've seen an angel, we're going to die." And she looked at him and said, "Well, the angel just told us we're going to have a son. What do you mean we're going to die?"
Exactly.
And so it's like, God's going to take us through this thing. We don't have to worry about it.
Yeah. Somebody look up John 15:18. John 15:18. How many times did the children of Israel say, "God, you delivered us from Egypt only to kill us in the wilderness"? If I delivered you from Egypt, why would I kill you in the wilderness? I'm trying to get you to the Canaan land. If I called you to do something, why would I abandon you in the process? Doesn't make any sense. And sometimes we feel like that. If God gave you a child, young couple, if God gave you a child, he's not going to abandon you when you need wisdom to raise the child. He's going to give you wisdom. He's going to show you what to do. If God gave you a spouse, he's not going to abandon you when you run into trouble. He's going to be with you and help you and guide you and lead you. In this verse, we can identify with Gideon in John 15:18, if who can read that for me, John 15:18. Brother Terry? Looks like Lydia is raising her hand because of the way he's like over here. Go ahead, Terry.
If the world hates you, you know that it hated me before it hated you.
Yeah. We're in good company. If you get maligned at work, reviled for your standards, mocked for your beliefs, if they call you old-fashioned, or if they say that you're the bane of society, we're in good company because that's what they called Christ. Then verse 31 is Gideon's Gideon's father, the father's reaction to this. Somebody read verse 31 for me, please. Verse 31, Brother Phil.
And Joash said unto all that stood against him, Will you plead for Baal? Will you save him? He that will plead for him, let him be put to death whilst it is yet morning. If he be a god, let him plead for himself, because one hath cast down his altar.
This is an amazing verse. Tell me your reaction to this. Tell me your reaction. I just love this verse. Yes, ma'am.
I loved it. I have it underlined because that is such a great response. You know, it makes them think right away.
Yeah. Brother Phil?
I don't know what his father's state was before, but obviously it was on his property, right?
It was his property. This is his altar.
So sometimes you can be in the wrong track, and then all of a sudden you see somebody take a stand like that.
Yes.
Not only that, they're coming to go trying to kill his son. And he's like, wait, my son's doing something so important that he thinks is so important that he's going to tear down my own property at the hands of possibly being killed. You know what? Now's my time. I gotta do something.
Yeah.
And he snapped to it finally.
Brother Brian?
There's kind of a Christ-like answer where he's not condemning them, but he's actually teaching, and he's pointing
Yes.
out, hey, what else do we got to do for this guy? We have to find him a wife. We have to feed
That's right.
him. Hey, can he do anything for himself? Let's see what he can do.
That's exactly.
Without calling them stupid. Or he kind of is, but he doesn't use those words. He's like,
Yes.
answer the question.
Yeah. Ken?
When 911 took place, there was a talk show, it was a radio talk show, and they said, what should America do in light of what happened? The Twin Towers came down, and there was a Muslim man called into the talk show, and he said, bomb Mecca and Medina's holy sites, both of them. He said, if you destroy those holy sites, all of Islam will fall. And he said it'll be their end because their God has no power against your God.
Wow.
And the radio talk show guy was just silent. It's like he said, what are you saying? He said, I'm telling you, this will destroy Islam.
Wow.
And of course, nothing came of it. But that's
Man. This, to me, it's like this aha moment, like Phil was talking about. I mean, I'm presuming that this altar and this grove and such obviously was owned by the father, perhaps presided over by the father. Could we make the suggestion that he was a priest to Baal? Maybe. But he's housing it. He's He's the one providing for it and sustaining it, and it's his son that destroys it. And it's this aha moment of, I may not be where Gideon is in his service to God and in his faith, but I'm certainly not where I was. I'm at really an impasse on what I should do here, and I'm making some very reasonable, logical assessment of his world. And he wasn't just a casual observer of Baal worship, he was all in. I mean, this guy is the worst of the worst as far as Baal worshipers, and Elijah had no quarter for them. Jehu had no quarter for them. They brought him in and they cut their heads off, and they brought him down to the river and cut their heads off in the river. I mean, these guys were horrible people, and yet even one who is totally invested in a sense, satanic worship was like snapped out of it, and he says, wait a minute, what am I doing? I mean, if God can do that with him, God can do that with anybody. God can reach anybody through a faithful, righteous witness. And I can't read the minds of these guys, but if we just saw them lined up the day before this happened, and we had to pick who is going to respond well to Gideon's actions, who's the likely candidate for quote-unquote revival from our perspective, we probably would have never picked Joash. We probably would have never picked Joash, which is Gideon's father. We probably never would have picked him. He's the priest, or he's the owner of the altar. And yet it's that guy who says, wow, something's wrong with what I'm doing. This is not right. Let me at least weigh in the balance. Come ye together and reason. I misquoted that, but let us reason together, saith the Lord. He is definitely reasoning on what's happening. And boy, if God can reach that guy, God can reach anybody. He really can. So, any other comments on that? Yes.
It's not a perfect correlation, but it makes me think of the blind man of the New Testament where the Pharisees came to the parents. You know, they were accusing him.
Yeah.
And the parents basically, you know, there's not a real good correlation.
Sure.
But I think of these men and the Pharisees approaching the parents.
Yeah.
And the parents
So ask him.
basically saying, the proof's in the pudding.
Yeah, exactly. So now Joash does a little bit of a strange thing, and he says in verse number 32, therefore on that day he called him Jerubbaal, saying, let Baal plead against him because he hath thrown down his altar. So I don't think Joash is all in as far as renouncing Baal worship and right next to Gideon and fully supporting Jehovah God, because he calls Gideon Jerubbaal, which means Baal is going to fight against you. So it's an odd thing to call your kid. Baal is going to get you. The boogeyman's going to terrorize you. Satan is going to kill you, is what he called his own child. Now, I don't think he was meaning it in a curse way, like, I hope it happens, but from the context, it looks like he is saying, let's see. If God is God, then he can protect you, and my words won't matter. Let us see what Baal will do. You can run headlong into spiritual warfare, and I will applaud that. I have no condemnation for that. But boy, that stuff scares me. And I don't rush into it. I've had some experience with it in Africa, dealing with Satan face to face. But boy, I hope nobody ever says, let's see if Satan kills you. I've had some weird things happen to me since I became pastor. I think it's this place, the spirit of Pastor Nelson coming back or something. But that is, he is saying there is a spiritual battle here. There's a spiritual warfare. It's not just the altar and Ashtaroth and names and bad actions. There is a bad spirit here, and I'm going to call you a different name. I'm going to put a target on your back for the devil. But listen, it doesn't matter how much the devil hoots and hollers and yells and screams and growls. He doesn't have any power over the Christian. And so the Christian can live in the lion's den, as Daniel did. The Christian can walk on water as Peter did. The Christian can walk through the Red Sea as the children of Israel did and be free from harm, because it's not our faith or our godliness or our righteousness. It's Him. It's all Him that keeps us safe. It's all Him that protects us. Any comments on that? Any comments? Yes, ma'am.
Do you think that he protected his son from these men, but kind of handed him over to Baal because of his worship or altar or?
I think that's exactly what happened. I think he was still in the middle. I think he took the one side for him to protect him from the men, but he still kept his foot in the worship of, okay, we'll see what happens. I think that's exactly what he did.
I think he's kind of setting it up, like this is the champion, Baal, against the challenger.
Yeah.
Gideon. And let's see what happens.
Yeah. And as much as people will criticize Gideon for his timidity, and he is timid, he was timid behind the threshing floor. He was timid with the angel. Certainly it can't be me. I'm from the least of my father's house. He was timid with the message when the angel said, "You are the one." He's like, "Oh, I don't think so. Let me do this test with the food." He was timid when the fleece came, and he brought the fleece out several times. But what a great choice for a champion, though. I mean, we would choose the guy who's been in Bible college for years and years and years. We'd choose the guy who's the head of the mega church down in Texas or whatever, and 5,000 people, and we'd say, that's the champion. God says, no, I'll choose my champion. And he chooses Gideon, timid and humble, meek. What a great champion for God. And I just want to share this illustration. I heard it years ago. There was a zoo, and there was a lion in the caged area, and they watched this guy come in and start to clean the cage. And they're like, what in the world? And the lion just never paid him any mind, and like, wow, this is just amazing. I can't believe this. This guy's got courage and everything. Well, it found out later where they actually saw the guy later, and they asked him about it, and he said, oh, that lion is so old he has no teeth. And so he can't eat anyway. We have to mash up his food. And what a great illustration of the devil. He has no teeth. He can't fight us. He can only growl. He can only look ferocious, but he doesn't have any teeth anymore. Verse number 33. You have this very specific conversation and then a somewhat general event. So we'll say verse 20, well, actually all the way back to, verse 11 down to verse 32 all happened in like 24 hours or less, okay? Now 33 is kind of a general statement of what's happening next, and it says, then all the Midianites and the Amalekites and the children of East were gathered together and went over and pitched in the valley of Jezreel. This is one of the other reasons I don't think they were occupying. I don't think they were staying there. I don't think they invaded and then lived in the cities and enslaved the Israelites. I think they came and gathered all the food in the harvest and then went back to their country, and they were coming and going because the Bible says when they came, they would be like grasshoppers and sand as the sea, and the people would go up and live in the forests and the caves. But then in this context, you see them all back in their houses. But time passes, the harvest comes, and they come back. And also, I had this thought. It doesn't say specifically, but do you think there was somebody who correlated the invasion with the Baal altar being destroyed? And somebody saying, see, you destroy the altar of Baal, and then there's an invasion. This is what was protecting us. It doesn't say that specifically, but boy, the criticism that is probably coming to Gideon. Then verse 34 is the last one we will look at, 34 and 35. But the Spirit of the Lord came upon Gideon, and he blew a trumpet. Trumpets are used throughout the Old Testament to communicate. They had trumpets to gather the people. They had trumpets for like judgments and speeches and assemblies. They had trumpets to move the tribes, to have them gather up their belongings, and they were going to walk through the wilderness. They would communicate with trumpets, and so we don't know exactly what he is communicating, if he's communicating a certain staccato, and they know what that means, if he's saying there's going to be an assembly. But what I like about this is the last time Gideon did something for the Lord, it was private. It was at night. The next time he blows a trumpet publicly. I see a progression in Gideon, getting stronger, getting more courageous, getting more public with what he's doing. It's a very public proclamation. And perhaps even the enemy hears this. They're in the valley. I don't quite understand all the geography. Names have changed, etc. So I don't know exactly how close the enemy is. But he does blow the trumpet. And who is it that gathers? Who is it that gathers? Okay. Verse 34, who is gathered? Abiezer. Who is that? Look at verse 11. Who is Abiezer? His family. His family follows him. But what we were just talking about, we were just talking about his family, his dad at least, saying, let Baal plead against you. You're in trouble. If Baal kills you, then we'll know that Baal is right. Can you imagine the thought process of this father saying, if I wake up tomorrow and my son is dead, I'll know that this false god is real. That's what he's saying. That's how he's operating. And yet just a few verses later, we don't know if exactly was the father, but the family all gather around Gideon. Wow, that is tremendous. That is amazing, the change that was happening. A family that supported Baal worship, that was providing for Baal worship and sustaining Baal worship. His family are the very ones who had an altar to Baal on their property, and they join the battle. I appreciate what Brian said. You have this tug of war. You have people slowly processing, and maybe Gideon spoke up in his own defense, but we have no record of that. All we have a record of is God working upon the minds. Wait a minute. God, Baal, wait a minute. Couldn't Baal just have stopped Gideon from destroying the altar? I can't believe we're worshiping such a weak God. And by the way, that is what God did in the plagues to Egypt. He systematically attacked every single god that they served. They served a frog god. They served the Nile River. They worshiped the Nile. They worshiped the sun. They worshiped flies and fleas. They worshiped fire, and so there was fire down from heaven. So all those gods couldn't protect them. So he was helping them to see, and eventually they worshiped Pharaoh, the firstborn. So he was helping them to see that all those things that they thought were truth were lies, and he was exposing them. So these people who are looking at these lies of Baal worship, now they are serving Jehovah and saying, I will join the fight. I will be part of this. It is pretty amazing. Perhaps some of them were demanding his death still. We don't know. They could have been part of the men of the city, but at least they were joined unto him. Pretty amazing. Any comments as we wrap up for today? We'll stop there for today. Any comments? What's your impression of him now? Yes, sir.
Well, I think when he took down the grove, the word got around, right, the community, and being courageous for the Lord is inspiring. You don't know who you're going to inspire, and I'm not that surprised the family came, because the Lord's working on many people at
Amen.
times, and sometimes it just takes one courageous soul to change a community or a nation. And so I think people were inspired by his courage.
How difficult do you think it was for those fat family to change? I mean, I'm not trying to, I don't think we should trivialize the change. I think it was a massive change for them. And they're all in on this side, and then we see them just a few verses later. We don't know how much time was there. They moved. What a picture of growth. You know, what a picture of the patience that God has with people. Anybody else? Anybody else? Thoughts on Gideon? It's a tremendous, tremendous example. All right, let's go ahead and stand. We'll be dismissed in a word of prayer. Let's sing. Let's sing. There is a name I love to hear, and then we'll be dismissed in the song. There is a name I love to hear. I love to sing its worth. It's how